Hi, it's Mike Morse. Welcome to another episode of Open Mic. We have an interesting edition today for you. You've probably seen on the news the Hill family versus the Wuestenberg family. The Hill family, a mom and three kids, were leaving a Chipotle restaurant when there was a bumping that happened in the lobby of the Chipotle. It poured over into the parking lot where the Wuestenbergs claimed that the Hill family blocked them into the car. Were jumping on the car or smashing the car window with their hand. And the Wuestenbergs jumped out with guns. And the police were called. The Wuestenbergs are now charged with a felony. And we interviewed the attorneys for both families. And we're going to play both of those interviews for you right now, back to back. And I'd love to hear from you after the episodes as to who do you think is telling the truth? Do you think the Wuestenbergs should have been charged with a felony? Do you think they should have pulled out guns on the Hill family? Do you think the Hills had any fault in this? Do you think they egged him on too much? I'd love to hear from you. Please email me, comment, like, subscribe, do all the things that you like to do, and we'll see you soon. Enjoy this very interesting episode.
Joining us this morning is Mike Morse, Detroit's top attorney. Mike Morse is in here to tell us about the backpack giveaway.
Adapt and change things up a little bit every year. Hi, I'm Mike Morse. Welcome to another episode of Open Mic Home Edition. Today, we have attorney Chris Quinn on, who represents the Hill family. This has been all over the news, all over the internet. His clients were accosted via gunpoint by the Wuestenberg family outside of a Chipotle. Tequila Hill, 34 years old, and her young children, one was 15 and the other ones were younger, had weapons pulled on them for an incident that happened at a Chipotle. And so I wanted to learn more about this. And attorney Chris Quinn was nice enough to agree to come on and talk about what happened to his clients. So let's bring on attorney Quinn.
Good afternoon. How you doing, Mike?
I'm well. Thank you for coming on.
Yes, thanks for inviting me.
So, this was another, it feels like every single day we are seeing another event. I saw one this morning as I was scrolling through the media with people accosting people, whether it be guns or verbally. All I got to say is thank God for the cell phone video, because people would deny everything.
Exactly.
So, I know you're doing national news. You're all over the place, but why don't you just, for the people who have been living in a hole, tell us what happened to your clients.
Okay. This was a situation in which Miss Hill, who's a mother of three, was out in Auburn Hills, and she was taking her daughters. There was three daughters, ages 5, 13, and 15. And they were going to the Chipotle out there in Auburn Hills. And as the 15-year-old was leaving the restaurant, she was bumped into by Miss Wuestenberg. Words were exchanged. And Miss Hill, the mother, saw that her daughter was in this verbal dispute with an adult and decided to see what was going on. Obviously, emotions had already run high prior to Miss Hill getting there. And as a mother, her instinct was to initially do what any mother would do, which is protect their child. Miss Hill did not like the way that Miss Wuestenberg was talking with her child. Words were exchanged. I don't know if your viewers have seen the video. There were statements regarding race and things of that nature. And
what did she specifically say? Give me an example of something.
I heard a statement that there was an accusation thrown at Miss Wuestenberg that she was a racist. And
so your client called Miss Wuestenberg a racist. I have heard that.
Yeah.
And then Miss Wuestenberg got all up in arms about that.
Exactly. And she indicated that was not the case. There was conversations additionally about her, Miss Wuestenberg, apologizing for bumping into my client. I don't believe that actually bumping into her 15-year-old daughter. my client's 15-year-old daughter.
Well, let me stop you for 1 second. Do you believe, does your client allege that the car actually physically touched her daughter?
Well, the car that was the second encounter. The first encounter was actually between the 15-year-old child and Miss Wuestenberg, where my client then walks up and addresses Miss Wuestenberg and her bumping into her daughter. That eventually Miss Wuestenberg, her husband comes out, Miss Wuestenberg's husband comes out, escorts her into the vehicle, and they proceed to leave. My clients and her daughter proceed to leave. What escalated the situation even further was the fact that the Wuestenbergs' van on the second encounter almost hits Miss Hill. Miss Hill, obviously upset and scared that she's going to be injured, hits the back of the window with her hand.
So the car was backing up towards her, and she
Like,
said,
stop,
"Hey, I'm
yeah.
back here." She hit the glass.
Right, and
Stopped
so
the car.
right, and so the car stops, and the Wuestenbergs jump out like Bonnie and Clyde with guns, brandishing firearms at a 15-year-old and my client in a public parking lot.
That's crazy. They both had guns?
Both had guns. That's where they both were charged with felonious assault.
I saw that. How scary. And we saw the video of the woman, back up, the whole thing. I mean, in this day and age, you can't do that.
Exactly. But I think what a point that people are missing here, Mike, where we really have to focus on is the initial contact. We have an encounter between a 15-year-old teenager and an adult. At that point, I believe that the responsibility is on the adult to de-escalate the situation. We never get here if the adult says either sorry or I don't know what you're talking about, or just keeps moving. Hey, I'm sorry, I don't know what you're talking about. Just kind of blows the situation off, gets in the car and leaves. The adult did not do that in this situation. The adult engages in a verbal dispute with a teenager, which it doesn't make sense from the start.
Well, it shows what kind of person Miss Wuestenberg is. But I'm confused. Did the 15-year-old allegedly say something like, "Hey, you bumped into me," or "Don't bump into me"?
Right, and say, "Excuse me," wanted some acknowledgement.
Excuse me, or something like that.
Wanted some acknowledgement that she had been bumped into by Miss Wuestenberg, and Miss Wuestenberg wasn't either willing or didn't believe that she should do that. But regardless, there could have been a way to calm that situation down. It wasn't necessary. No big deal.
That stuff happens all the time in normal life. Somebody bumps into somebody and you're, "Hey, you bumped me," or whatever it is. I mean, it doesn't end up in weapons being drawn.
Right. And then I think another point that people are missing is that at the first encounter, the Wuestenbergs had an opportunity to assess my client's, I guess, perceived danger or threat. Obviously, there was escalation of emotions. At no time in that first encounter did my client ever threaten to use a weapon, threaten any type of physical harm, and obviously the Wuestenbergs could see that they were not armed. But
good point.
But what's interesting is the Wuestenbergs knew they were armed. So when that second encounter comes around, here you have a situation that individuals not only protected by their vehicle, but they have the ultimate protection, which is a firearm. Both individuals are armed, and the individuals that they're have a dispute with are not armed, and they know it. So
you're probably right that people are missing that, Chris. I mean, the fact that the Wuestenbergs were able to assess, here's a mom with 3 young kids.
Right.
They're, even if they shouldn't have said excuse me, even if they were being rude, even if they were doing whatever, that never gives somebody a right to brandish a gun. But then it gets taken outside and she hits the car, which the Wuestenbergs are now saying that they thought what?
Well, I think that where the Wuestenbergs are, their first argument, and this is just through what I'm seeing on TV,
right,
is that somehow my client was preventing them from getting in their car, obstructing their ability to get to their vehicle. some form of harassment. I'm not sure how that occurred because they actually did get in their car. So if you've got a man and his wife, an adult male and his wife, and a teenage daughter and another woman, I don't think there's a big issue in terms of getting in your vehicle, and there wasn't. They got in their vehicle, but they're saying that somehow my clients harassed or obstructed their ability to get to their car.
Which I couldn't see that from the video, because you're right. The first time I saw it, they were in the car. They hopped out of the car with the weapons, knowing full well that these are children, knowing full well. So was the racist comment made in the hallway or in the
It was
vestibule
the
of
first
the
encounter.
Chipotle?
It was outside in the public. It was the first encounter
Got it.
between
Who
the
was
daughter.
videotaping? Who was videotaping?
I believe one of the daughters, Miss Hill's daughters.
Okay. And have we learned if these guns were properly licensed and they had the right CCWs and everything?
Imagine, just based on the charges, normally they were charged, both Wuestenbergs, with felonious assault. If they were not licensed holder, there would have been a CCW, carrying a concealed weapon charge included with that, which I did not see.
So because you do a lot of criminal defense and a lot of our watchers and viewers don't understand what felonious assault is, will you please explain it?
Well, in layman's terms, it's just putting a person in fear of some type of injury or threat. You can verbally threaten somebody or putting them in fear that they'll be injured in some form or fashion, and so that's an assault.
It's just a threat with a gun. I mean, so this is for everybody watching. Even if you pull it out just to scare somebody, you could be charged with a 4-year felony and have your life turned upside down, like these people's lives are now rightfully turned upside down.
And what's interesting is that there was no felony firearm charge. Normally, when a person is carrying a firearm and is committing a felony using a firearm, there's an additional charge of felony firearm. But
so you think that they undercharged this, maybe?
Well, the evidence will speak for itself. Obviously, I haven't had a chance to review the discovery. I don't want to second guess the Oakland County Prosecutor's Office. I just handle a lot of criminal cases, and I know it's almost anytime a gun is involved and there's an assault or some other felony, unrelated felony with the gun, there's usually this felony firearm charges added, but it wasn't in this situation.
When's the first court date for them?
I believe it's the 14th of July. It's called a probable cause conference, and that's where the prosecutor will basically give the discovery materials to the defense attorney, and they'll be discussing scheduling a date for what's called a preliminary exam, which is a hearing where Miss Hill and her other witnesses will have to testify about whether a crime was committed and why the Wuestenbergs were involved.
And your client and you will probably be there watching that, I assume, and be witnesses.
Absolutely. But one thing I think is also important, Mike, because I know in today's climate, with what we've seen on TV, with guns being pointed at unarmed blacks, one thing is concerning, and I think this is important, and that's what I want people to understand is what was going on subconsciously or consciously with the Wuestenbergs, where they felt justified or entitled to pull a firearm on an unarmed black woman and her child. I mean, it's almost mind-boggling, but where's the threat? What is going on implicitly where you believe that the situation requires deadly force? And that's where I think that conversation needs to talk, because I think we see this a lot, and I think there's something implicitly, either consciously or subconsciously, where we see blacks, African Americans, and having firearms pointed at them, and I don't know if it's because of what we see images on TV, whether we in our own households discussions, but this is something that I think is important to start talking about and having a conversation about, so we don't find ourselves in a situation where a mother and child could end up dead because of some subconscious bias.
I was scared to death watching that video.
Right.
I thought, oh my God, is she going to pull the trigger on these people who are just standing there, clearly not a threat?
Right.
It's really scared me, and I agree with you. Could you imagine if your client pulled out a gun on this white couple?
How would that be viewed? But there's all these, and I'm sure, Mike, in your field, you deal with these biases that we really don't kind of deal with. They're kind of deeply rooted in our mental state, and we really don't talk about it. But at some point, I think it's important that, and I think the country is doing a good job of doing that, but we really need to kind of talk about these things, because obviously the Wuestenbergs felt extremely threatened in a situation that really didn't call for that. And
I agree, and we do need to keep talking about it, because their attorney is saying comments, and I'm reading some notes here. A guy like Eric, his client Wuestenberg, has been taken down because someone uttered, "You're a racist." How fair is that? Where's the due, process of that? I don't even understand what he's saying.
Exactly.
Do you understand what he's saying?
No, but there is, I think, this and we're getting. I've seen a lot of progress just in the last 2 months. Some things that I wouldn't imagine, in terms of us discussing racial inequities, our beliefs and perceptions about each other, and why do we think this way, and why do we have these conversations, and why, just like you said, Mike, what would happen if Miss Hill would have pointed a firearm at?
There would have been a SWAT team.
There would have been a SWAT team,
and she would be dead.
Right, and that's very true. Somebody,
in my opinion, biased, unbiased, whatever. Biased.
Somebody could have seen that and took the law in their own hands, and just said, "I'll do this before the cops get here. They won't." So we have these things, and we need to talk about it. I'm not saying that the Wuestenbergs are terrible people or bad people, and I'm sure Mr. Wuestenberg served his country well, but there was something that made him and his wife feel justified or entitled to pull this firearm at this black mother and her daughter, and that's concerning, because they're not the only ones that may have this fear or these thoughts that they feel that they need to use that type of force when they're encountering black people.
Have you, and it's okay if you don't answer me at this time, because I know the criminal stuff is coming up, but have your clients considered filing a civil lawsuit against the Wuestenbergs? Well,
I'm sure, Mike, you're more of an expert in that than me, but obviously they're getting therapy. I mean, that's necessary. My world is the criminal law world, where there's an issue of who's right and who's wrong. I think in the civil world, it's not so much about who's right or who's wrong, but what are the damages? I mean, obviously you could be right and no damages, and what's the point? So I know that they're getting therapy. They're talking to a therapist. I know Miss Hill has missed some time off of work. All of those things, they're just trying to piece their life back to normal. And I guess as this process works itself out, we'll see where it ends up.
It's a good answer. And I think you're right. And there has to be damages in every civil lawsuit. But I'm telling you, I'm damaged from watching that video. I can't imagine. She's a million times more damaged than I was. And it was just so upsetting. That's one reason I wanted to have you on. So if you had one question for their attorney or for the Wuestenbergs, what's the question that you have?
My question is what made them feel justified or entitled to pull that firearm on an unarmed mother and child? What was it about them that made them such a threat?
Okay. It's a good question. We might be interviewing their lawyer in the coming days, and I will make sure I ask that question. Any parting thoughts on this case or anything? I'm sure you and I will talk again, I hope, about as this progresses through the system, but any parting thoughts?
Just that I'm actually happy that this is receiving attention. I think bringing this to the forefront. Fortunately, Miss Hill and her daughter weren't hurt. Hopefully, hearing and looking at this situation, just like the situation in Minnesota or other situations, people start to analyze their thoughts and how they're going to address issues, and and hopefully we can have a further conversations about this so we can avoid anybody getting hurt.
Well, thank you for coming on Open Mic, Chris. You're doing a good job for your clients. I really appreciate you answering some questions, and it was nice to meet you.
All right, thanks a lot, Mike.
Take care.
All right.
Thank you for tuning in to Open Mic. Now we're going into part 2 with the Wuestenberg family attorney, Terry Johnson.
Today, I'm sure you've read about this on social media, in the news. There was an altercation last week in Orion Township. Two families were leaving a Chipotle restaurant. There was some bumping in the vestibule. It spilled out into the parking lot. Two white people, the Wuestenbergs, pulled out guns on the Hill family, and they've recently been charged with felonies. And I've watched the video. There's lots of questions on both sides, and who better to answer them than the Wuestenbergs' attorney, Terry Johnson, who is a skilled attorney here in the Metro Detroit area. He's very familiar with firearm cases and other types of cases. So let's bring on Terry Johnson.
Hello, Mike. How are you? Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Thanks for being here. I know you're busy doing national stuff and talking to the media. What a case you got involved in. But I think, your background is interesting because, I don't know many attorneys who are firearm experts. So just spend a minute or two telling me about your day job, your day-to-day law practice, what you're doing before you were hired in this case.
Sure. Well, I'm a criminal defense attorney by trade, and I've got a subspecialty in firearms. So not only do I have a specialty in firearms law, I also have I'm an instructor. And I work for a company out of Dallas, Firearms Legal Protection. What we do is, if you get in trouble by using a weapon to protect yourself or protect others, my company comes along and we take care of all of your legal fees, bail bond, and a few other things. And can I give the website out for that?
Go for it.
Sure. And that's firearmslegal.com. Again, firearmslegal.com. I'm the vice president of legal operations there. I can tell you that this is not a case where the Wuestenbergs they were not members, so I'm doing this as a private attorney.
Got it. So if they were members and something exactly like this happens, or they actually shoot somebody, your company will step in and provide unlimited legal services with excellent attorneys, civil
Correct.
And criminal.
Correct. So on the criminal side, it's kind of what I'm doing. On the civil side, if they were being sued, they'd probably, go to Mike Morse law firm or something along those lines, and we would pick up your fees to ensure that they are, they have the best attorneys possible.
Got it. So I've been, this is, I'm not a firearms expert, and so I have some questions about that.
Sure.
Most people have seen this video. The bumping in the vestibule, the spilling out of the street. From my perception, your clients were handling it pretty okay at the beginning, and then no guns. They hopped in their car, and then they start backing up, keep backing up.
Right.
It kind of appears that they were getting real close to Miss Hill, the mother. She smacks the back window. You're about to hit me. Stop. And all hell breaks loose. And they hop out of their car, and you see what you see on the video. I mean, you see what you see on the video with the woman, your client, back up. So is there more to it than what we see on that video?
Well, there's a tremendous amount that, the 3-minute video doesn't cover. And again, I think, I'm not sure which video you saw. There's one video that's about 14 to 15 seconds where it just shows one of my clients. And again, my co-counsel is Dean Greenblatt. We're both working together on this.
Okay.
And we both represent both of the Wuestenbergs. So let me back up for a moment. First of all, you said, there was some bumping in the vestibule. Not true. Basically, my clients went there at close to 6 o'clock to pick up food for their 4 children. Okay. They've got 4 kids. and they pull into the handicap spot. And the reason they're there is because, you know, the husband, Eric, is a disabled vet, 100% disabled. He parks. Jillian gets out. She goes in. There's a high top table there. She sees the food. She picks it up. And on the way out, apparently one of the Hill girls were walking into Chipotle. What basically happened was, it appears, or, you know, what my client is telling me is that, you know, the bag must have brushed against her. One of the doors was locked, you know, two big doors there. And she walks out. The bag may have bumped her. And a few seconds later, this 15-year-old is got her cell phone on. She's coming towards my client, and she's calling for her mother. And the next thing my client knows is she's trapped. And let me explain to you what I mean by trapped. In the front of my client is the van. She can't get in the van because to the left of her is the mother, who's yelling and screaming at her. To the right of her is the daughter, who was blocking entrance into the passenger door. And directly behind her is the outdoor seating, which there's a rail there. So my client is trapped at that point, and she's being berated.
Now, none of this is on tape?
It is on tape.
Oh, this part's on tape. Okay.
It is actually, there's a 3-minute and 9-second video that's out there.
Yeah.
And if you look closely, my client has nowhere to go. Every time my client attempts to speak up, she's shouted down, she's yelled at. You know, you violated a 15-year-old. And the funny thing is, Mom didn't see any of this. And the reason I know Mom didn't see any of this is because the young girl comes out and she says, Mom, she did this, she did this. Where are you? Where are you? So my client is trapped 4 times within that 30-second, 45-second exchange. My client is asking for the police. Call the police. I'm terrified. I'm scared. Okay. Her husband, again, 100% disabled vet, gets out of the vehicle and walks around. Okay. Took him a bit to get out of the vehicle because he truly didn't know what was going on until he heard, call the police, until he heard, I'm terrified. He gets out, he walks around, and he helps his wife get into the van. That is when that's when another problem comes about, because one of the Hill women, I'm not sure exactly which one, but one of them starts saying, you're ignorant and you're racist. And they walk up to my client and they say, yeah, I will kick your white, and I don't know if I'm allowed to say the A word here.
Say whatever you want.
Thanks. But, you know, I will kick your white ass too. Now, my client's like, what's going on? Who are you? What are you doing? Right? So a few words are exchanged. Eric goes back to the driver's side to get out of there. My client, again, Jillian, my other client, rolls the window down and basically says, hey, not all white people are racist. I'm sorry if you're going through this. Okay. But that unfortunately was not good enough for them. Okay. So my client has tried to de-escalate this at that point 3 different times. They're in the vehicle. They start to go in reverse. Now, if you look at the videos, once my client's backing up, no one is there. But again, it may have been the mother. I don't know, but I'll just say one of the Hill girls, which is either the sisters or the mother, goes behind the vehicle. Now, you'll notice the vehicle comes to an abrupt stop. The reason it comes to an abrupt stop is they have this mechanism on the Chrysler van. I guess most newer vehicles have it. You go back so far, you get too close, it slams on the brakes immediately. Well, the brakes are slammed on, again, automatically, and all you hear are people, not a person, but people beating on the window, okay? My client, Eric, gets out of the vehicle, walks around to make sure that no one's hurt. There's no damage, no one's hurt. Again, you don't know what's going on, because as you well know, you just can't leave the scene of an accident, especially if someone's hurt, because that is a criminal charge and you've committed a felony. So he gets out. Jillian, concerned for her husband, because again, he's 100% disabled vet, Jillian gets out as well. here's where the problem comes. Jillian gets out of the van, and within a second and a half, maybe two at most, here comes mom rushing her from one side. Here comes the other Hill sister coming from the other side, rushing her. And it's more than just those two, okay? Because remember, you're only seeing the visual from someone holding the camera. You don't know exactly what Jillian was seeing at that point. There have been reports from various witnesses. There were between 8 and 10 people out there. And my client at that point doesn't know who's friend or who's foe. You just see 8 or so people rushing you. Someone closed the door behind her so she couldn't get back in the van. And at that point is when she pulls her firearm. Because why? She's in imminent fear of death or great bodily harm. The other thing you need to understand at that particular point, she's trying to get people to get away, to stand back. Now think about it. You just tried to stop me a few minutes ago. You're cursing me. You're telling me you're going to kick my white ass, right? You're calling me ignorant. You're calling me a racist. I'm trying to leave. You stopped me from leaving. You stopped me from leaving. So now I get out and you're rushing me. She had no choice whatsoever but to pull her firearm for the protection of herself and her husband. And if you look at the video, she directed the husband to go back and call the police, which he did. So once she cleared the back of the van, and here's the other thing people forget, even though she had the firearm, she was retreating. One of the Hill girls who was recording kept coming at her. If you look, you see my client retreat, and you see the whoever's recording get closer and closer. Finally, she's able to get in the van, and you hear one of the young girls scream, "Mom, stop walking towards them. Stop walking, stop walking." My clients are on the phone with 911 as that's happening. They go approximately 500 feet because 911 instructed them, just get away from that area. Just don't go too far. Just get yourself to safety. That's what happened.
Okay. There's a lot there to unpack. And the police did show up at the scene?
Yes, the police were nearby at a Taco Bell, which is probably maybe 500 to 1,000 feet away. So that's why the police were able to respond so quickly.
Got it. Okay, so I have some notes here. Terry, you're an expert in firearms. You've said some of the defenses right there. People carrying firearms, people who have guns legally on them. They both had legally registered guns with a proper CCW, I assume. That hasn't come out that it was expired or anything like that. So let's assume it's
Correct.
all legal.
It was, yes.
According to one of your videos that I watched before our interview, your video is when can you pull out a gun on somebody, basically. And it was if you feel like somebody's trying to kill you, somebody's trying to rape you, or you have imminent threat of serious bodily harm right here and right now. And I assume that's the prong that you're going to be relying your defense on, that third prong.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was either death or great bodily harm.
Okay.
And
let me just dive in as somebody who, again, is not an avid gun owner shooter.
We'll get you there, though, Mike. I promise we'll get you there.
I'm probably a good shot. Mom with 2 really young daughters and a 15-year-old. I mean, I don't know how much. I mean, she obviously didn't have a gun. She didn't have a knife. She's a woman with kids, and yeah, she was loud, and I get the mouthiness and all that. But I don't see the right here, right now, serious bodily harm. So tell me why that is. Why was she justified in pulling out that gun?
Well, it is imminent. It is right here, right now. I want you to think about it, Mike. Someone has tried to stop you from leaving once. You've tried to de-escalate. You finally get in the vehicle and you're trying to leave again. They now stop you again. Once they stop you, you have people that are within 2 feet or less of you immediately. I mean, I don't think they're coming, to my client and say, hey, I want to sit down and sing Kumbaya with you. I mean, what would you think? These are the same people that a few minutes ago, not even minutes, a few moments earlier, just said they're going to kick your white ass. They're going to dog you out. These are and then they start banging on the van.
Terry, I hear you. I'm concerned, or my brain is flooding with examples. Every single person listening, watching this has been confronted by somebody, right?
Sure.
I can think of a million examples. Whatever the example is, even if somebody was going to threaten you with a fight, I mean, if somebody comes up to you and says, I'm going to beat your, I don't like you looking at my girlfriend, I'm going to beat your ass. Are you allowed to pull a gun on that person?
Well, let's, you got to look at the facts and circumstances of it. Is it a person or is it several people? As I stated before, my client saw a minimum of 5, and there are some reports there were up to 10 people there. I don't know who's coming at me. Okay. Secondly, what are the size of these people, right? For example, if somebody's 6'2", is somebody 4'5", I don't know. That plays into it. Let me give you something else. What are my physical disabilities? So, for example, her husband is 100% disabled. It takes a lot to be a 100% disabled vet. That's what he is. So even walking around is a little bit difficult for him at times. Okay.
I thought he had 2 jobs. I thought you keep saying that he's disabled. I thought he had 2 jobs.
What do you mean 2? He worked for Oakland University until they fired him a week ago because of this.
I thought he had a political job for somebody.
He was fired from that too. And again, when we say disabled, are we talking physically or mentally disabled? 2 different things. He's physically disabled. That's why he was parked in the handicap spot.
Got it. So he could do the jobs. He just can't get around real well.
Correct.
What is his physical disability, if you don't mind me asking?
I prefer not to get into that at this point.
Fine. So you're saying, based upon, the video doesn't show all the circumstances, doesn't show the 5 to 10 people. She will claim, it sounds like, that she had an imminent fear of serious bodily harm
or death.
Mm-hmm. And that sounds like will be the rub. What do you make? I mean, you're a criminal defense attorney. You've been doing this a long time. Jessica Cooper filed charges. Tell me what the charges were.
Felonious assault on each of on Eric and on Jillian.
And no felony firearm charges. Why is that?
That's a question for the prosecutor. I mean, realistically, that's a question. My question is not why didn't they file, felony firearm.
Why they filed the other one?
Felonious assault, right?
That I get, but I've never seen a case with a felony assault and there's a weapon being used that they didn't charge felony firearm. So I know that you know that. It's hard for you to say, yeah, why didn't they? They should have. Not that they should. And I know I'm not saying it right because you don't want them.
Yeah.
You didn't want them to charge him with anything. And I get that's obviously your position. But if somebody's brandishing a weapon, that second charge. So I'm wondering if they were trying to hedge it a little bit to make it palatable for an eventual plea. You're the expert in this. What do you really make of that?
Well, I think it's an overreach by the prosecutor's office, to be honest with you. If you look at the facts and circumstances, to me, the bigger question is why haven't the Hills been charged with ethnic intimidation? Okay. If you read the statute's very clear. Why weren't the Hills charged? Again, the thing that kind of gets me, unfortunately, is you have a lot of people who, here they repeat the same narrative, which is so untrue, which is, oh my God, another unarmed black person had a gun pulled on him by a white person. That makes it sound like in this case, the Hills were doing absolutely nothing, just sitting around, having tea and crumpets. And, here come these white people and they pull a gun on them. Woe is me, but that's not the case. In this case, clearly the Hills were the aggressors. Clearly the Hills did not want them to leave. And when you don't want someone to leave and it's more than one of you, what are you supposed to do?
So I didn't understand this quote. I just want to make sure that they got it right, and I wanted to ask you about it. You made a quote to one of the papers or news stations. A guy like Eric has been taken down because someone uttered 3 words. You're a racist. How fair is that? Where is the due process in that?
Yes.
I don't understand what that means.
So let me tell you what's going on with Eric and Jillian. Okay. Someone, especially in today's climate, utters 3 words. You're a racist. No one has to prove that they're a racist. No one has to prove that they did anything wrong. All it is if an African American hollers those words at someone who's white, all of a sudden things change. Let me give you a couple of examples. Eric has been terminated from his job. You see nowhere on any video that I can find, at least at this point, where Eric has pointed a gun at anyone. But yet he's terminated because Oakland University, unfortunately, is afraid that, you know, there's going to be some kind of outcry that they're hiring, quote unquote, a racist. Jillian today, during an interview, got a text message terminating her job with Hallmark. Why? A week ago, she was an upstanding employee. She had recently been promoted. Everything was going great. And she gets fired via text. These people they're in hiding. Why are they in hiding? I mean, no one can come forward right now and say that Eric or Jillian are racist. Bumping into someone, the last time I checked, is not a racial issue. Okay? If the people chose not to apologize, and I'm not saying they did or didn't, what was the purpose of the Hills demanding this right now? Does that make them racist? Where did race come into this when 2 people have bumped into one another? You know, take whatever story you want to take, whether you want to take Ms. Hills or you want to take my client. Why is this a racist situation? But you type in YouTube right now, white Michigan woman pulls gun, it's all over the place. And my contention is, well, real quick, my contention is, if they both would have been African American, I wouldn't be here. If they both would have been white, I wouldn't be here. The fact that it is a white person pulling a gun on a black person and the black person hollers racism, we now have an issue.
Well, I have 2 questions. Number one, if Miss Hill and her kids were white, do you really think that your clients would have pulled out the gun?
Absolutely.
Okay. And secondly, Terry, do you really think that your clients lost their jobs because they were called a racist by a black woman, or because they pulled out guns and pointed it at an unarmed black family?
Well, I want to address let's talk about that. The reason they lost their job, quite honestly, had nothing to do with performance, has nothing to do with due process. So let me ask you a question. If the Hills were to come back tomorrow and say, yeah, we made all of this up, would they give my clients their jobs back? Probably not. And you said an unarmed black family. What does that have to do with anything? Quite honestly, if I'm in imminent fear that 4 or 5 people are about to kick, and again, I'm going to quote what Ms. Hill said, going to kick my white ass, what am I supposed to do? Let them start kicking my ass until I see a gun, a knife, or something? That makes no sense whatsoever. But for the fact she had a firearm to de-escalate that situation, I believe my clients would have been severely wounded, if not killed.
Okay. Okay. So that's I mean, that's interesting. When is the first court appearance?
We've got the probable cause conference set for July 21st. That will be via Zoom. If we are going to hold a preliminary exam, that's set for July, set for July 29th.
So so your client was at Walmart. So just today she found out that she was fired. So they took a week. How long ago did this happen? About a week ago?
With Jillian?
Yes. No.
It happened. Or Eric?
No. The incident was about a week ago, right?
The incident was a week ago yesterday, correct.
And has there been any discussions with the prosecutor's office yet, or you're just going to take it through the normal channels?
We're going to go through the normal channels. Again, you know, I look at this as a clear-cut situation of self-defense. If someone can explain to me, you know, why they wouldn't let the Wuestenbergs in their vehicle, why they stopped them from leaving, and why they needed to rush my client, Jillian, as she got out of the van. I mean, if someone can explain to me that that's not intimidation or they mean no harm, then maybe there might be a discussion of some kind of plea, but no one's looking at the intent of the people that were the aggressors here. You know, why were they doing these things? You can't tell me this is over a bump. And who pulls out a video camera, quite honestly, and starts recording something where there's been a bump, unless you have other motives to handle this?
And you think what motives could they have had? My brain isn't working real well right this second.
Well, I mean, listen, they've hired Christopher Quinn, good attorney, friend of mine. But what's Mr. Quinn's role in this at this point? Aren't the Hills represented by the prosecution? You know, again, it's not a knock against Mr. Quinn, but what's the purpose here? Unless you're trying to get something out of someone, right? You're trying to blow this up into a major media story. But what people are not focusing on, they're focusing on the conduct of one party, which is the Wuestenbergs. And the question I have is, what about the conduct of the other party? Because if the other party, being the Hills, if they did absolutely nothing and my clients pulled out a gun, then I would absolutely agree with you. This would be a completely different situation. But if you look at the conduct that led up to this, they are completely justified in what they did.
So if I come take your gun safety class and this scenario is set up, I'm sitting in my car and this exact scenario plays out. You play a video of all this. You're saying, Michael, pull out your gun, back them off, cock the gun. Is that the right word?
No, it's not. You want to load one in the chamber?
Load one in the chamber.
Mike, I'm gonna give you a free class. I'm gonna get you. Right.
I saw her do that. I got scared. I didn't want it to go off by accident. You know what I mean? Like that scared me.
It's not going to.
It's not going to?
It's not going to. The only way a gun goes off is, and I want you to think about this. Her finger was not on the trigger.
Okay.
Her finger was never, ever on the trigger.
Is there a safety?
Doesn't matter. Unless your finger is on the trigger, that gun is not going to discharge around.
Was that a Glock?
No, it was not. It was a different type of firearm.
And so you're saying you would recommend to your students to do exactly what she did.
What I would recommend, and this is what I always say when I do the legal part of any class, a firearm is a tool of last resort. You don't use your firearm first. Could my client have pulled her firearm out when she was trapped between the van, the post, and the two women? Could she have? Yeah, probably. She attempted to de-escalate a few times. Could she have pulled her firearm out once, she first got out of the van? She could have, but again, there was no imminent threat. She pulled her firearm out as a tool of last resort once the mother and the other daughter started charging at her and were within a couple of feet away.
But didn't she pull it out in the car and get out of the car with the gun?
No, sir.
Okay, I must have. Okay, she was out of the car, felt threatened, pulled out her gun.
Correct.
Got it. Because I saw her in the car and I'm thinking to myself, just not as a lawyer watching this, I'm thinking, just drive away.
But
none of this would happen. Just drive, please drive away.
But Mike, that's the problem. she couldn't drive away because they had blocked her in the back and there wasn't enough room for them to go forward because there was another car next to them. So
Okay,
driving away would have
again.
been great. Yeah, driving away would have been great, but there's two problems with that. One, they couldn't drive away. And second, they may have just hit somebody or hurt them. What do you think the narrative is going to be there? You know yourself as an attorney under Michigan law, you just can't hit someone or hit something and drive away. That's a crime.
So, you know, Jessica Cooper, interestingly, I interviewed her. I interviewed Karen McDonald this week.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, interesting lady, Karen McDonald. I've come out supporting. I like her. I liked her answers a lot. Do you think any of this is political? She's up for election in like less than a month. You know, there's a primary, a Democratic primary, which, as you know, doesn't happen very much.
Correct.
Any thought? I know it's a guess. Just any idea like this? These charges? Do you think they're to help her get reelected?
You know, that would be a question I would ask Jessica Cooper, which I'm sure you probably already did.
Well, this was after, or else I would have.
Oh, okay.
What's your listen? You practice in her courts, in the criminal courts more than I do. What's your gut?
My gut tells me that, quite honestly, if we didn't have the climate that we have right now, things may be a little different. Okay. I don't think any elected official right now is going to stand up to this mob-like mentality that we have, this bullying that's being done, you know, because otherwise you wouldn't see companies like Hallmark fire Jillian. You wouldn't see universities fire Eric, because nobody wants to stand up and say, wait, this is absolutely wrong. I mean, Mike, we've gone as far as changing the face of Aunt Jemima syrup, which I like, by the way. I mean, when did this become racist? We had a black president 4 years ago, and it was never racist at this point. But now it is the biggest racist thing we've ever done. We've got that. We've got Uncle Ben. I mean, what is this world coming to where two people who bump into each other can't just walk away? And again, my client attempted to do this on 3 separate occasions and was continually stopped.
Well, I wasn't ready to get into all the police shootings and all that with you, and I don't think we should go there based on time. But I mean, I think you know, doing what we do for a living, and especially with your expertise, I mean, you know, there's been a lot of crazy shootings going on, white people on black people, and this is, I mean, we are inundated for the last, I mean, more than a few months, years with unarmed black people getting shot by white cops. And
how many?
I don't have that count right now.
I do.
Tell me.
I do. We've had 9 unarmed, and I want to go back to that word in a moment, unarmed, but we've had 9 unarmed black people killed in the year 2019 by police.
Okay.
18 unarmed white people killed by police in the year 2019. Okay. Now, the question becomes, what were some of these people doing, even though they were unarmed? I just want to bring up one that, like, listen, everybody can look at George Floyd and know that is disgusting, it's wrong, and those cops should rot under the jail. Everybody will agree with that. But I wanted you to take the incident that happened in Atlanta with Mr. Brooks, right? Mr. Brooks was drinking, driving, fell asleep, right? By all accounts, everything was going well until it was time for Mr. Brooks to be arrested. You hear people say, well, they should have let him go. No. You know, Mike, how many times have you seen the police let anybody go in a drunk driving?
I don't agree they should have let him walk away.
Right.
I don't agree they should have killed him, but go ahead.
Well, they didn't. But here's the other part of this.
Well, they did end up killing him.
Think about the 5 felonies that Mr. Brooks committed and what happened. Felony number 1, resisting and obstructing. He resisted arrest. Felony number 2, assault on an officer. Felony number 3, he took a weapon from an officer. Felony number 4, fleeing and eluding. Then he took that weapon and turned around and shot it at the officer. So it's not, and you say, well, he's unarmed, but here's the problem I have with that. 2 weeks earlier, the same prosecutor called this a weapon, a taser, when it was used by the police on African Americans trying to get them out of a vehicle. But now the same prosecutor says it's not a weapon. So my point being is the rules need to be what the rules are. They don't need to change as it relates to the color of someone's skin.
I hear you. So the taser thing, you know, I heard a story that a taser gets two pumps, 2 shots, and they were already shot. So the cop knew that there was no danger being shot at him, and he still pulled the trigger. What do you say to that?
Let's go back for a moment. If you look at that tape, you'll understand that the cop never had the opportunity to check fully Mr. Brooks for weapons. Okay. In the heat of the moment, how do you know how many shots have gone off of that taser? One of them actually did deploy towards the officer. Okay. So how do you know, that, you know, is the officer supposed to stop and say 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, or is the officer supposed to stop and say, well, wait a minute, I don't know if he's got another taser. I don't know if he's got my partner's gun. I don't know what this guy has. And I can't, as a officer, I can't let this person get out in the general public because he may hurt or kill someone else.
That you know, when that happened and we all watched the tape and I've talked to my friends and family, I knew that one was not going to be as straightforward because there was a lot of bad stuff going on.
Correct.
But I think, you know, again, with the other 8 shootings, I think people are getting tired of seeing it. And I don't know how, you know, it's bad. And I get what you're saying, that more white people are getting killed by cops, but there's a lot more white people than black people, Terry. You got to admit that. And,
absolutely.
And so it's, you know, we're not going to solve this right now, but I hear where you're coming from. I don't know if I 100% agree with you, whether it was justified or not. I think that's a tougher case. I think that's not a slam dunk like George Floyd or some of the others. That's going to be that they're going to have a lot more to talk about in a criminal trial in that case.
Absolutely.
Unlike the George Floyd case that should be pretty quick.
Correct.
But it's interesting to know, you know, I hear where you're coming from. You're a firearms guy and you know that stuff well. And so now I know who to call when I have those issues and questions and when I want to have an expert like you on this podcast.
Anytime. I appreciate it. And Mike, I appreciate all the great work you do and, for this Metro Detroit area and across Michigan. So thank you for everything you do.
That's so nice, Terry. I plan on having you back on. Maybe we'll do one with you and your friend and we'll have a little debate one day, but keep up the good work and we'll talk soon.
Thank you. You have a great day and look forward to talking to you soon.
Thank you, Terry. Bye-bye.
Bye.
You never know who you're going to see.
Be one guy one-on-one my whole career.
What you're going to hear.
Got a lot of desperate people in the city.
On my podcast, Open Mic. Find it where you find your podcasts.
Well, thank you for watching another episode of Open Mic. Lots that we just kind of talked about with Terry Johnson. He's an expert in firearms, an excellent attorney, doing a very good job for his clients, which us lawyers need to do no matter what side of the table you're on. Whoever, if you agree with the Hills, you agree with the Wuestenbergs, this is not an easy, straightforward case. Let me know in the comments what you think. Tell me who you think was more at fault of this. Tell me what you think, why a charge was brought by Jessica Cooper. And share this, like this, subscribe to our channel, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.